Hurricane Ike was pressing down on the Gulf Coast, and we lived here in Houston. And as the hurricane was getting closer, we were gathered around watching it on TV, but Katharine was asleep on a pallet in another room. There was smoke filling the hallway, and I hollered fire. When I approached the room where Katharine was, the fire was actually lapping out of the doorway. Katharine's father came running past me and dove into the room. Moments later, he and Katharine emerged. Everything happened so fast. There wasn't a lot of time to think. There was time to just react. Katharine had burned over 70% of her body. Face was bright red except for just little circles around her eyes, which were white. The look on little Katharine's face of bewilderment and, I'm sure at that point, shock for a 4.5-year-old. I had an advantage being a pediatric occupational therapist, that I had knowledge of the amazing work that Shriners Hospital does for children, not only with burns, but with orthopedic and many other areas. So it was almost second nature to think, when Katharine can be stable, she needs to get to a Shriners Hospital. The Shriners Hospital in Galveston still hadn't reopened, and the hurricane was traveling northward, and to two of the other Shriners Hospital for children with burns, it was headed their direction.
Well, it was a busy time for us also, but we always do our best to make room for any child with a burn, and we did.
I think this is a case that really epitomizes Shriners, in that Shriners is about teams. Shriners is about teams coming together to help patients. In this instance, we stepped in and said, okay, it's time for us to step up to the plate and take care of this child.
Katharine was wrapped from head to toe. I could see her face, her eyes, her nose, her lips. Everything else was wrapped in bandages.
They were able to cover her wound initially with skin from other people that were stored in our skin banks. She was burned over half her body, and that carries a very significant risk of mortality.
It wasn't until 6, 7, 8 weeks out that we finally made it to that pinnacle of, I think we're at the moment that we can change our focus from just surviving, but surviving and living.
This building that we're in right now had been damaged fairly significantly by the hurricane. We were seeing outpatients and doing surgeries in the Houston Shriners Hospital on Main Street.
At the very beginning, when Katharine came to us in rehabilitation, she was very frightened. She was very scared.
She was having at that time some symptoms which we would call post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. She was remembering not just the burn accident. She was remembering all the pain and suffering you go to when you first get burned.
Slowly, Katharine began to trust us therapists. So we were able to do more and more with her. The rehabilitation was painful, but Katharine is a fighter. And slowly, she began coming out of her shell, if you will.
I've never had a burn patient do any better at rehabilitation, at facing 20, 30 operations, facing multiple different doctors, facing painful experiences. She's a miracle.
I'm never going to let anyone slow me down.
She has come from a desperate and terrible experience to being a little hero filled with vim and vigor and running around a mile a minute.
Way too fast. No, I'm not going to let anything or anyone slow me down.
This little girl is smart. She's got a very attractive personality, a very positive attitude, and I think this is going to serve her well in the long term.
2, 3, good.
Well, I do art, piano, voice, dance, gymnastics, and run.
That energy she has, she's so vibrant. She attracts people to her to talk to her. She's so pleasant, beautiful smile. She's a happy, young, normal child.
I don't really want to think about what would have happened to Katharine if we hadn't had Shriners Hospital. I prefer to think I'm so grateful that we had Shriners Hospital when we needed them the most.
My favorite person in the entire world is God. And I love my parents. And then I really, really love the Shriners because they help me a lot. They're like my family, but they are my family.